In the real world, we always wonder, what if something else happened in a different scenario? However, in this reality, we discuss and find out what truly happens in the world of what if. Hello, and welcome back to What If, Episode 4, the finale. Today we take a look at what if George Lucas made the sequel Star Wars trilogy rather than selling it to Disney. Because as you guys know, in the real world, George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney in 2012 for, I think, $3 billion, something along those lines. Crazy numbers. However, today we take a look and we discuss what is the potential of what would have happened if George Lucas had made the sequel trilogy. Now we must take a look at the facts to begin with. He actually had ideas that he wanted to give Disney, and he gave them the scripts. However, they didn't want anything to do with the scripts, so they chucked them out. George Lucas would keep the plans, of course, to how he wanted them to be when he gave them to Disney, but this time he'd make them himself. Firstly, it would be about the Whills of the Force, which Star Wars was actually kind of about at the same time for the first 6 movies anyway, from his perspective, from the perspective of the Whills, as they are the ones that created the Force. It was the will of the Force. However, the sequel trilogy will go into more depth about the Whills and be more mythical and philosophical rather than about politics, and it will still have that politics in it with the crime syndicate run by Darth Maul, and it would focus more on the underworld side of Star Wars rather than what we know about the Empire and obviously the prequels in the Clone Wars era. But now it would be about the crime syndicates and how Darth Maul was controlling them. Luke Skywalker would be the main focus and main centerpiece of these projects. Still become a Grand Master, however they wouldn't kill him off this time. He would grow his academy till he became Grand Master and was truly running the academy to his full power, and he would reach full potential, one of the most powerful Jedi we would ever see in Star Wars, even more powerful than Master Yoda and of course Anakin. And that would just be the start for the first film. It would just to set the stage for what these films could become. Probably, I imagine, these movies would go on to make at least $1 billion each, with everyone apologising, obviously, for the backlash that prequels got in the first place. George Lucas would go on to direct and write all 3 of the sequel trilogy. But Darth Maul would be the main villain, and he would be a huge threat. Not on the level of Darth Sidious or the Emperor, but still a huge threat. And he would be a Luke Skywalker level threat he'd have to face alone. But it would come with many challenges. Many new side characters would be introduced, but Han Solo, Leia and Luke would get more scenes on together along with Lando, and they wouldn't be split up in each movie and killed off one by one like they are in the Disney sequel trilogy. This is important, as George Lucas knew the story, he knew the source material, as he obviously made it, but he knows the lore as well. So changing this perspective on Star Wars, and at least still keeping it to the Skywalker name, while also making it different, made people really want to watch these films, which of course in the real world we all wanted to see what would happen if he did the sequel trilogy. And he would really make Star Wars great again. Star Wars would be huge, and it would be beloved by everyone, and there wouldn't be a separation like Episode VIII Last Jedi caused. There would be a huge celebration for the franchise, saying that Star Wars was truly back since 2005, and George Lucas would be really enjoy making the content again. In each film, they would all focus on a different plot, while still being familiar in that same Star Wars territory. But Luke would go on to marry Mara Jade, but he'd have to try and persuade her to change and leave the Empire remnants, which he tries to do in the first film, and then it's the second film where they fall in love. And the third film obviously would be about their kids, so they could carry on the legacy of films in another trilogy later on down the line. But for the most part, the sequel trilogy would be huge. A huge success. And George Lucas would be praised for all sorts of his accomplishments. The merch would sell bigger than ever. And he would be the biggest known film director at the time, and even be bigger, as these sequel trilogy movies would make more money than the Disney sequels and not get as much hate, whereas Disney will still be fuming the fact they could never have bought it. It would never come to the Disney theme parks either. Universal instead tried, and George Lucas had a thought about it, and he gave them permission to use Star Wars in the Universal parks, as he knew his reputation wouldn't be damaged. Of course, Luke Skywalker and Darth Maul would have fights in the movies, there'd still be lightsaber duels, there'd still be spaceship battles. But it would focus mainly on the Crime Syndicate and the Jedi Order, this new Jedi Order with the New Republic. And it would show a new perspective of Star Wars, but still have that family and all about the Skywalker's appeal, which is what Star Wars has always been about. But the Whills would be a main focus too. Each film would open at 1.5 billion at minimum, and he would still go on to make TV shows like the Clone Wars, animated ones, and the Mandalorian kind of esque show would happen, but it would be more about the crimes on Coruscant rather than the Mandalorians. But lore would still continue to be expanded in comic books, video games, and of course the movies and TV shows. But of course it wouldn't be just about TV shows anymore. George Lucas would also do it about the movies, which Disney seemed to have abandoned. So George Lucas would truly have a win with this franchise again. He would still expand more lore on Darth Vader, and we'd probably get the Old Republic movie that we all wanted, which still never happened to this day. But maybe George Lucas would have brought an Old Republic TV show or game. But we know the sequel trilogy would have been a success. And with all that being said, thank you for watching this final episode of What If Season 1. I've been your host, and will hopefully see you in Season 2. Thank you guys all so much for the support on this series. It's been huge, and it's been a good, successful series, I'd say. And you guys really enjoyed it, so don't worry, it is coming back. But this is going to be a break for now. Thank you for watching What If Season 1, Episode 4.
Real thrills.